Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In my Battlefield Reddit video, I mentioned that there was a section that I was going to include, but decided to make its own video. That topic was about DLCs in Premium and how players are making an argument that DLCs were better than the current model that Battlefield 6 has. Or was at least wasn't as bad as players remember it. In this video, I'm going to argue that no, Premium wasn't a good thing, and much like my last video, this isn't a defense for EA. EA again isn't liked by the gaming community. I'm going to start off this video by talking about what players don't like about the current model that Battlefield 6 is following as a way to prove that I'm not defending EA, and to show why players are trying to make an argument that Battlefield Premium and the DLC model wasn't as bad as players thought it was. Then I'll explain why Premium and the DLC model not only still has problems, but that it should make a comeback for the Battlefield franchise. One of the current criticisms for the live service model is the limited time modes and events. Not only are you not able to play these events once they are done, but players who have real world stuff to worry about won't have time to play these events. Players are less likely to play these limited time modes, and as a result, they won't get the rewards that are locked behind these events. This also extends towards the battle pass system, since when it ends, you will not be able to go back and do the battle pass. Both sub-factions and even weapons can be locked behind these battle passes. Thankfully for the weapons at least, when the season ends, there are still ways to unlock them. The same can't be said about the sub-factions. Panopticon 8 was unlockable in this first season, meaning if you missed season 1, well now you have to hope the next season has a free skin for that sub-faction, but you won't get the original skins. A point I saw made about the current system is that because of whales, EA could potentially make as much money as they want, just as long as they keep releasing skins. Players who spend money on DLCs are only ever spending money on those DLCs, but a player who buys bundles for the same price could potentially keep buying more and more skins, potentially giving EA way more money than they would have originally with the DLC model, on just one person alone, just as long as they keep releasing skins. Players see the new skins, the limited time modes, the constant monetization, and the FOMO tactic that EA pulls on its player base. But they also see the lack of new maps. Players as a result think that maps are no longer being prioritized anymore. They saw how Season 1 had only 2 new maps, and Season 2 came out with 1 map and a second to be released later down the line, despite a delay with the season. They see that Battlefield 5 had its live service cut early, and how lacking 2042 was with its content. This led to players to look back at the franchise during its premium days. They see the constant release of new maps with no out-of-place skins being constantly pushed on the players. They see how premium was also allowing friends to play together just as long as someone had premium back in Battlefield 1, meaning players don't have to worry about owning premium themselves. An argument is made that since players have to pay for content, the devs are now required to make quality content worth paying for. To many players, they feel that the games were more focused on giving quality content and were less likely to be abandoned by the developers. This is where reality comes in. You still have to spend money on DLCs. Buying multiple DLCs could cost more than the base game itself. Obviously, players want to play the new content since they can get bored and tired of the base game content, assuming they even like the base game content. This in itself can be a FOMO tactic, but instead of limited time modes and events, it's an entire expansion. Paying for the content doesn't guarantee its quality either. People still had to pay for Battlefield 4, 5, and 2042, which all had bad launches. A DLC can still be released with a map players don't like or a map players don't want to play as much. How many players like Dragon Pass compared to Propaganda? The Caspian Border remake for Battlefield 4 was criticized for adding a giant wall that wasn't in the Battlefield 3 version. Players still had to pay for the DLCs that the Caspian Border remake and Dragon Pass were in, regardless if they liked it or not. Battlefield 4 had only 3 free maps that you can download. The rest you had to pay for. In-game bundles have a similar issue to DLCs, since if you only want a skin, you'll have to buy a full bundle regardless if you like the other options or not. But despite this issue with store bundles, it's still not as bad as DLCs. DLC maps are new content that you have to pay for where the quality isn't guaranteed. DLCs, despite being optional, are still new maps, weapons, vehicles, and even game modes. Bundles are also optional, but you're not required to pay for it in order to play the new content. Something to consider is that players join at the end of the game's lifespan, but they still have to pay for content, regardless if the server for the DLC are empty. It's not guaranteed that we will get another chance to get all the DLCs for free. I would argue that live service still encourages maps to have quality behind it, because you can't get money from a player who stopped playing out of boredom and frustration. Now imagine telling that same player that they are required to spend money on the new content, versus just giving the player the new content for free and telling the player to buy an in-game skin. Weapons can be locked behind these DLCs, in a way causing the game to be pay to win if the weapons were any good. In Battlefield 4, the F2000, the CS5, and the Unix 6 are some of the weapons that were locked behind a paywall. Gadgets like the UCAV were also behind this paywall, as well as some camouflage. If DLCs were to come back in the modern day, instead of the game telling you to buy a new skin as soon as you open up the game, it's the game telling you to buy a new DLC instead. Because players have to end up paying money for the new content, it will cause the community to be split. You won't be able to play on servers that have DLCs on them, and if you are, you will be removed once that DLC comes up. This will create FOMO within the community, which will cause the community to be upset. Premium giving players priority in the queue could make players even more angry, since they will feel as if they have to pay in order to not wait in a queue as long. The community is already upset with being put in lobbies filled with bots. Now imagine that you're paying for the game to give you a chance to prevent that. That wouldn't go over well with the community at all. There are more arguments that try to explain the positives for DLCs, but I don't think they're really good at all. One argument is that the DLC model gave structure, it also gave DLCs a theme, as well as a set deadline for developers to give out quality content. This argument isn't really great since it assumes that roadmaps are not a form of structure with a deadline that developers have to meet, not to mention that seasons have themes to them. Another argument I saw is from a comment that claims that DLCs made games cheaper. DLCs did not make games cheaper. Games over time did get expensive, but it wasn't because of DLCs. A point I made earlier is that DLCs, if you buy multiple of them, they can cost more than the base game itself. Let's use Battlefield 3 as an example. Battlefield 3 costs 20 USD or 20 euros. One DLC alone will cost about 15 USD or about 10 euros. So on just one DLC alone, you're either almost spending as much as the base game, or you're spending about half as much. This does not factor in inflation. Without factoring in inflation, Battlefield 3 with all of its DLCs will cost more than the base game for Battlefield 6. The premium edition for Battlefield 3, however, costs 40 euros or 40 USD. It's also a one-time payment and you'll get all the DLC maps. This is something that Battlefield Premium has over Battlefield Pro. Battlefield Premium is a one-time purchase, where Battlefield Premium is a subscription that you have to keep resubscribing to. This is where I want to talk about Battlefield Pro. In my opinion, Battlefield Pro is just a modern day version of Battlefield Premium, but instead of DLCs, it's Battle Passes. In a worst case scenario, if DLCs were to come back, Battlefield Pro would just take the spot for Battlefield Premium. Not to mention that the in-game store and Battle Pass would possibly stay, meaning the only thing that's going to be different is that now you have to pay for the new maps. Just think about what the community asked for versus what the community got. Like instead of grounded realistic soldiers covered in camouflage, we get soldiers with skull masks. Now think what would actually happen if DLCs were to make a comeback. It wouldn't end well, I'd assume. Battlefield 4, Hardline, and 1 all had battle packs that you could buy. These gave you a random chance of winning specific rewards. In Battlefield 4, for example, you could have gotten XP boosters, camouflage, knives, and even weapon attachments. Battlefield 1 would introduce a puzzle system where you have to get multiple pieces of an item from a battle pack in order to unlock said item. Shortcuts were also in these games, where instead of playing the game and unlocking weapons, you could just skip it all by just buying a shortcut. If you look farther back in the franchise, Battlefield Heroes, for example, was pay to win. I'm bringing these up since greedy tactics were used in the past, It's currently being used, and it will be used in the future. It will most certainly be used if the DLC model were to make a comeback. Battlefield 1's first DLC released about 5 to 6 months after the game was released. It added 6 new maps, 6 new weapons, and a new tank, among other additions. Battlefield 1 has an excuse to not have as many new weapons and gadgets due to the time period it's set in. 2042 and BF6 have less of an excuse, unless it's related to its development. It took about 7 months for 2042 to have its first season because how terrible the launch was, and it added 1 new map, a battle pass, a new specialist, 2 new weapons, and a stealth helicopter for the US and Russia. Compare this to what Battlefield 6 had received in less than 6 months. Currently, the new content since release are 3 new maps, 2 new vehicles, 8 new weapons, and 2 new gadgets. We can see that within less than a year, BF6 has gotten more than 2042 did in its first season. Season 2 was delayed for Battlefield 6, which I think was because of the December update that had introduced a lot of problems to the game right as developers were going on holiday. Developers were also working on Season 2 and made some changes based on player feedback. The first season for 2042 was possibly lacking on content because of how much focus was on fixing the base game first. Over the lifespan of 2042, portal maps and weapons were brought over to the game's main multiplayer, but it still didn't deliver much content. Season 1 for Battlefield 6 did have its problems, and Season 2 seems to solve some of those issues. Maybe the seasonal content for BF6 could get better, but we will have to wait and see. During the production of this video, EA had fired an unknown number of developers across the different studios that worked on Battlefield 6. This is made worse by the fact that there's already claims that the developers are low on resources for Battlefield 6. With the game's troubled development and the current issues plaguing the game, it's clear that Battlefield 6 will continue to have issues if EA keeps making terrible decisions. But despite the current problems with Battlefield 6 and its development, the answer is soon to be a return of DLCs. That isn't going to fix all the issues with the game or its development. If anything, it would just add more problems to an already frustrated community. A community that's not very hopeful for the future of this franchise. People are already upset with the current monetization, the matchmaking, and the lack of content. Think about how more angry players will be if they are now required to pay for the content after everything that's been criticized about the game. Not to mention EA finding a way to mess everything up. If you like this video, consider leaving a like, dislike if you dislike, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future, and remember, give EA more of your money. Oh, I love spending more money on full price games. I love EA, Charlie. I love EA!